Hello, Jim Howard here in Fort Worth, Texas. It's 2:50 a.m. right now. About 50 minutes ago, I was laying in bed, and I'd been laying in bed for, I think, about an hour or two, thinking about things that happened 40 or 50 years ago. Work work related things like that. So I just decided to get up and, and do something. I'm not sure at what point in my life. I'm 82 years of age. I'm not sure at what time. I used to, until fairly recently, I don't know how many years ago, I used to lay down and go to sleep immediately. I mean, immediately. And at some point a few years ago, um, I can't think of any way that I could come up with that, you know, the time, how many years or whatever. But for many, many years now, it's been I lay down and lay there for an hour or two thinking about things. And it's usually about things from work many years ago, injustices, racism, things like that. And a lot of it is how the situation was handled, and whatever. And so anyway, now I think that's one reason I stay up, for this thing of me not being able to go to sleep right away. So I think at some point here I've just decided, well, to stay up until I'm really, really tired and go to bed. I'm not sure that this is working out the way it should, but anyway. So, wanted to mention now this shooting took place in Texas a few days ago, I think. I'm in Texas, but I'm in the northern part of Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth area. This took place a little bit further down. And with this thing that's posted on it here in the news, a few things that I didn't know about, I don't think any of us maybe knew about, have popped up. A few days ago when this happened, in a rural area in Texas, and that may have had something to do with this. The police they may not have been many, I'm guessing, county sheriff, I'm guessing. Because it sounds like the police were called a bunch of times, and about this incident, I think. Some of it it's not real clear. But late at night, a neighbor, was out in his yard late at night, firing off a rifle, and the people who live next door went over to the fence, and there was a big fence there, and the neighbors went over and said, sir, could you please, don't shoot your gun off here, please, could you go from maybe on the other side of your, of your house or something instead of right here, because we've got a baby, who's having trouble sleeping because of the gunshots. And now a few days ago when this happened, I thought that the man immediately shot the people who were along the fence, on the other side, that he immediately shot them. But I thought it was kind of strange. Because the information was very small. Anyway, the shooter, now, with today's information, I thought the shooter just started shooting, from his position over, next door. But apparently he went over next door and into the neighbor's house and systematically, and he shot him in the head, killed 5 members of the family. One of the things that was, confusing, like 4 members were, adults. One was a child in the house. And I was thinking, well, I was thinking he shot the 4 at the fence. They were at the fence and he shot them in the head. And I thought, well, I guess a round, he must have fired at the house, and a round went in and happened to hit I think it was 9-year-old boy, who I believe was in bed. Anyway, it didn't make much sense. Well, it turns out, no, he went over next door and proceeded to shoot people. And then he took off, he left. And they're looking for him. Now, I'm not going to talk, because people have talked about, so many guns and so many people having guns and people having guns who shouldn't have guns, and just, all that's been back and forth. And I just want to see something, done about this situation. I want to see the Republican Party and the Democratic Party and the gun dealers and the gun sellers and all. I want to see those people get together and try to make things, improvements. I don't expect them to solve everything right away, especially with the right wing, fanatical and crazy on the subject of guns. But I'd like to see them do something. Now, this popped into my mind, I think, while I was laying in bed a while ago. And maybe that's not the best, maybe ideas that pop in your head when you're laying in bed is not maybe the best thing. And this would not work. There would be, I think, legal reasons why it wouldn't work. And then also I think it would not be productive because it would just give the other people who are crazy, the Donald Trumps and those kind of people, it would make them crazy. And it would just be counterproductive, because they would use that then, oh, look, the liberals are trying to take all of our guns away, they're trying to do this, it wouldn't work. But this guy who did the shooting, he's Hispanic, and it sounds like the sheriff's department, I'm guessing, this is a guess, took quite a while to show up. And maybe if they had shown up, I was I was reserve officer in a small county for a police department for years and years. And occasionally we would have to go out. The county would call us and ask us to go out and handle something because they only had one officer on duty for the entire county. And then there was several years, I'm not sure how long, where the county did not have enough money to have a car out. The sheriff's deputy would set it, who was on duty, would set at the sheriff's department in Harrisonville because they didn't have enough money to have a car out running, out running around, and so I've talked about that too. The fact that, well, that's a whole new. Let's not enter that subject into this right now. If you have a major police department, hopefully, you have proper supervision, proper training, proper pay, checks and balances, and all that type of stuff. But, if you're a small town someplace, if you're somebody who lives out in the county, and you call 911 or whatever, it may take a long time for somebody to get there. And so that's a subject I've talked about too, but then that enters into problems too, because of legal jurisdiction and that type of stuff. I think if you have a county, if you have a town that has 8,000 people in it or something, I don't really think you can afford a police department. So maybe the county, if the county has money, maybe you should just use, the county and have them assign an officer to your city, and things like that. Have the highway patrol. Have them. Texas has constables. Well, they have Texas Rangers, and they also have constables. I think I mentioned one time, talked about that a little bit, the constable thing. But I'm already kind of off subject because this guy, took off. He killed 5 people, executed them, shot them in the head, and he's gone. Now, how did he get away so quick? I think it took the police, the sheriff's deputies, I'm guessing, a long time to show up. And I'm guessing about this. I don't know this. I'm guessing that the people who were complaining about the neighbor shooting off a gun late at night, they may have told him, they apparently told him, please could you go on the other side of your house and shoot the gun, because we've got an infant that is having trouble sleeping because of the loud noise. And I'm guessing probably that, we'll find out later on that this guy said, fuck you, this is my property, you're not taking my gun right, whatever, insane land, And I'm thinking probably the family said, well, we're going to call the police, And he said, they're not taking I'm guessing, they're not taking my guns away from me, you liberal, blah, blah, blah. And they probably called, I'm guessing, because it said something about that they called numerous times. And the police didn't show up immediately. And that might have entered into it a little bit, If the police had showed up right away. Of course, I don't know how crazy this guy was. I have a feeling he was really crazy. But, then he might have just told the police, hey, this is my property, and it's in the county, and there's no restrictions on firing of, when you can shoot the guns off, and all this kind of stuff. Where if it was in the city, there would probably be an ordinance saying, no, you can't just go and be doing, in a city with all these houses around and livestock. You just can't be shooting it. There'd be something like that would probably enter into it. But this guy took off. Usually a lot of these shootings and situations like that, when something happens, somebody does something, and pretty quick the police show up. Sometimes not in time, but they show up usually pretty quick. Anyway, I was thinking of this, which would not work, but I'm just trying to think of things, this would not work because I think it would be ruled, unconstitutional or something like that, and there'd be other things. Okay, this guy took off, and they haven't located him yet, the guy who did the shooting. And they did the tracking with the cell phone, thing, and they found where he finally dropped his phone off, and things like that. One thing, I think, like I said, this will not work, and I'm sure it's probably a Supreme Court would rule, Second Amendment or whatever, something like that. But, okay, this guy took off immediately. And, probably the police department or sheriff's department or whatever, they probably, didn't have any money. Like I told you, I was a reserve police officer for a small police department. And for years, we were all they had were reserve officers. Well, wait, they had, in the beginning, well, it doesn't matter. In the beginning, wasn't chief of police, constable, I forget what it was. They had one person, and who was paid almost nothing, I'm sure. And so then there was 7 of us reserve officers, and one of us patrolled every night. And now you were a reserve officer, so you didn't have to go in. I never missed, for X number of years, I forget how many years it was. I should look it up. I've got some paperwork where they promoted me to, patrol, whatever that was, and then I was promoted to sergeant. And I have a letter, so I would have an idea as to how long but before we started getting full-time officers. In the beginning, we didn't have a full-time dispatcher. We didn't have a dispatcher. We had to use Cass County, and sometime in there, we were then on. We flipped because we didn't have our own dispatcher. We were on the Cass County frequency, and a few times we would call, and no answers. I think eventually we got it. Eventually, what would happen was, that's when Cass County couldn't afford to buy gasoline for their vehicles. And so if there was a sheriff's deputy on duty, which there was, he probably was sitting at in the office drinking coffee with the dispatcher or something like that. They may have gone in the other room, to get something out of a vending machine or something like that, or whatever. So if I would call in, no answer. So I'd have to call several, on the radio several times, and finally, I guess the dispatcher probably had the thing turned up, would finally hear it and come over and, Anyway, this is my crazy idea. Don't worry. Nobody's gonna, they're not gonna write this up and put it into effect or anything. Okay, this guy took off, and there was multiple problems with that. I think what they should do, and I have to insert this again, don't worry, this is not going to happen. But the NRA, National Rifle Association, I used to be a member for many, many, many years, but when they got crazy, I loved their magazine. I read it from, American Rifleman from front to back. The National Rifle Association, I don't know how many, the government should know, like taxes, and also you could have congressional hearings where you would find out just how much money does the National Rifle Association have. Okay, so I'm just going to take an amount. I'll make up something. I have no idea. Okay, let's say, I can take any amount because it doesn't really matter. This is, let's say $100 million. The National Rifle Association would pay a special tax of $100,000 to go into the XYZ fund. You'd call it something else, but just make it XYZ fund. Okay, gun manufacturers in the United States, and then I guess outside the United States too. I'm not sure about that because of tariffs, and I don't, but let's just stick with the United States. Okay, gun manufacturers. They make a lot of money. A lot of money. Just the last weapon that I carried for many, many years, Smith & Wesson handgun, I think it was $600 or $650 for that. Then I had to pay for a couple extra clips, Anyway, the gun manufacturers make a ton of money. Congress should pass things saying, because of, and then they, of course, would, hey, here are the number of people dying. Here are the number of people who are, who are shot and permanently disabled or or in wheelchairs or, whatever these things are. And so in this XYZ fund, gun manufacturers will pay, X amount of money. Not enough money to put them out of business. Just one way you could kind of work on it is how much do the gun manufacturers pay, how much do they give to, bribes to people in Congress, how much do they spend on, advertising and influencing, whatever. I mean, you could come up with these numbers. Congress, a lot of times Congress doesn't, they don't come up with the stuff that they should come up with, Especially like the Republicans, they have their agenda. But I mean, Congress and whatever, they should be able to come together with all, so so you have the NRA, you have gun manufacturers. Now, gun stores, I mean, they make a lot of money too. The price of guns are just amazing here. And you have some of these people sometimes that do shootings or whatever, and the person will have, 20, 30, 40 assault rifles. And, I mean, how do they come up with, that kind of money? So now they're, gun stores. It could be a mom and pop operation or whatever, but, taxes, figure out how much they make, and then somehow adjust it, tax-wise, and not take, you'd have to use sense, but of course it's not going to pass, even if you did this, an intelligent way with the collaboration of, all of Congress working together to help with this, but take all these things into consideration, and I'm not sure who else should, be putting money into the XYZ corporation. Then what you could do would be, for these small towns, you could have funds going to help them have police officers and actually have police who can respond to a 911 call. You'd have small, I forget how many people, Raymore, the place that I was a reserve officer, they actually had, it was funny. People in the greater Kansas City area, Raymore, Missouri, they thought, a bunch of hicks out there, whatever. And the city of Raymore wouldn't take, they didn't want to expand. They didn't take in some areas that they could have taken in, just, gone a mile or two in this one direction or whatever, and they would have ended up having a hospital built in that area and all kinds of stuff. But they didn't want anybody, and they wanted to keep it, the people there wanted to keep it just, but I was surprised after many years. I knew nice houses were being built in, there, and there was no apartment buildings, by the way. No apartment buildings. The town didn't want, we don't want apartment buildings. We never really had very many, if any, like disturbances, drunks, that kind of stuff, because there weren't any apartments in Raymore. Then when we started having apartments built, then you started getting those kind of calls. But, with this fund, then for small towns, for sheriff's departments out, some of the sheriff's departments are unbelievably bad because they don't have the money. But the government should think of other ways, okay, if you don't have X amount of money, then how can you have a police department and maybe the highway patrol or the Texas Range, depending on whatever you call, maybe those people could handle it, and if they have enough money, I'd have to have tax money going and stuff like that. But with this XYZ fund of money coming in from the NRA and from gun manufacturers and from things like that, maybe you could help the counties and maybe come up with some other ideas, and in a case like this too, that could come out of the fund. That's where I got this guy he's taken off, he's missing because it took the police a long time to get there. Normally the police, if something happens, a shooting or whatever, and the police get there pretty quick. Maybe not in time. Maybe sometimes, just almost in time. In order, and a few people don't die who would have died or something, But this guy has got away. With your XYZ fund, what you could do is just create a new law, I think. Maybe you could take one that already exists. I wanted to mention, that's why I kidnapping back in the United States. I'll put a link to this, by the way. It doesn't really cover the old days, but kidnapping in the United States back in, I don't know, the 1920s, 1930s, maybe before that or something like that. There was, I guess, a lot of poor people looking to make some money, and there was a bunch of kidnapping going on. The federal government came in and passed a law about kidnapping. I'm not sure if it was life in prison. I think it was death if you were convicted of it. I mean, it was like it came in, and then basically uh, your kidnappers decided, wait a minute, let's go rob a bank, or something like that. But there was another thing back that, what was that? Something else. When I was laying in bed, it was in my head. Now it's not. Um, but what you could do, uh, and there again, I really am not advocating it. I'm just trying to think. People think. People, please get together and try to work together. What can we do to fix whatever the problem is? Whatever the problem is, whatever you think the problem is, let's try to get together and in good, try to work on the problem. It could be health care, it could be homelessness, it can be a whole bunch of things. Try to figure something and try to work it out. Now, in this case, uh, this guy, uh, killed 5 people and took off, and they haven't got him yet. I'm sure he'll turn up. Although, being Hispanic or whatever, he may get into Mexico or something, and might be a little more difficult to get. But this would work if, with this XYZ fund, you have the money going for these various purposes and don't use it for anything other than, But in this case, make it if you've killed. Well, I'm not sure if make it if you've killed 4 people, 5 people. Get together and figure out look at the statistic. How often does somebody get away? But just come up with, like in this case, in this case here, the guy has got away so far. Maybe here in a few hours they'll catch him, but nowadays with, cell phones and all this, of course he threw his cell phone away, but, make it, on this, the people, Congressmen can figure out how, okay, you kill somebody with a assault rifle, maybe that should be in there. But then you'd have a debate. You'd have to spell that out. What is an assault rifle? And what so I guess don't get into that. But okay, make it if you kill somebody with a firearm, and you're not arrested, right away, you'd have to work on that. Make it a $1 million. People love the lottery here in the United States, maybe around the world. They love the lottery. They'll spend a lot of money buying a lottery tickets. Make it a $1 million. So and so did such and such, and there's a $1 million reward for him. I imagine he'd get caught real quick. There'd be a bunch of people. There's people there's people on YouTube trying to make money. They think they're going to get rich on. Now some do, I understand. Some people do make a bunch of money. But the number of people that, yeah. If you, a few years ago, I don't know, I'm old now, but a few years ago, I think you had a lot of kids in grade school and in high school or whatever, that they're not going to study, American history or mathematics or anything else. They want to be a basketball player or a football player or a baseball player. That's how they're going to make, and that they're going to do. That's what they're. Now you got, I think those same kids are like, oh, they're going to make money on YouTube. No, you're not. Very, very, very few. It's the same with sports. Very few. But in this case, hey, there's got people out running around, and I have a friend that used to work for the Weather Bureau for many, many years. And I told him, these people driving around, chasing down tornadoes and that kind of stuff. I said, they're driving at a high rate of speed. they're going to get to the thing and blah 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 blah. I'm giving my point of view, which I know nothing about. And he said, no, they actually bring, there's information that they supply, that helps, with predicting of weather and things like that. And I said, well, I didn't know that. And but you have all these people running around. Maybe instead of, running around for weather, maybe they'd be running around trying to catch these people for $1 million, and do other things like that. Just come up with, work together and try to come up with things that are constructive. Especially the Republicans, they want to take books out of libraries. They want to take medicines off the shelf. They want to do, they want to control all these things. And there's other things that need to be taken care of. And you need to cooperate with the other side, with the Democrats or whatever. And, but, yeah, what other, of course it's not going to work. But, too, what has happened quite a few times, you have people who are, having accidental discharges of their firearms and stuff like that. Now that's a total, this popped into my head, so this is now, the XYZ fund, okay, forget. But like here in Fort Worth, there was probably a good guy with a gun. But he was in Walmart and he went to, at the checkout lane, and he went to pay, and he reached for his billfold, and he had I don't know if he had a concealed weapons permit or not. Probably did. But he reached for his gun and the gun went off and fired a round into the floor. There was a lady with a couple kids behind him. Now they didn't get shot, but material from the floor, concrete or whatever it was, came flying up, and injured them. Didn't put an eye out or anything, but, injured them. Minor injuries. Probably didn't even go to the doctor. But those kind of things happen. A lot. In that case, the guy took off immediately. I never saw where maybe, he just took off. He ran. Probably afraid that his concealed weapons permit was going to be taken away or something like that. And I'm not suggesting $1 million, reward to find him or whatever. But things like that should be. I never had an accidental discharge of my firearm. The first hospital that I worked at, security, there wasn't an accidental discharge. Now, we had 2 security officers killed, and in the line of duty. But I don't count that. Anyway, none of us had an accidental discharge of a firearm. The next hospital I went to, a security officer there was shot, but it was a defective round. So it, injured him on his arm a little bit, Lloyd Akins. But there was an accidental discharge before I went to work there. A guy was in the security office, security officer was in the security office, and he was having to go to the range, so he was dry firing his gun, and it went off in the security office. Nobody was shot. But, at the police department, where I was a reserve officer for years, none of the reserve officers had a accidental discharge. But when we got a full-time officer in, one of them, at night, because when we first got a he worked a midnight shift, and he accidentally at night his gun went off, fired a bullet through the wall into, and the chief of police office was really small. If it had been during the daytime and the chief of police was in the office, he'd have probably been hit because the office was extremely small. But anyway, back to the second hospital. Okay, at the second hospital, during the Republican National Convention, which was held in Kansas City, Missouri, we were on 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week, for like 2 weeks with no days off or whatever. And one of the security officers said, I came in, and the director of security said, oh, so-and-so, he dropped his revolver, and he said, okay, from now on, we're only going to have 5 rounds in our revolvers. We're going to have to keep the one underneath the chamber, with no round in it. And he said, because so-and-so dropped his gun and it went off. And I said, no, I'm having 6 rounds in my gun. He said, oh, no, yeah, I made a rule, and I said, I don't care. I'll have 6 rounds in my gun. Which is kind of funny. Later on, he would have loved to, gotten rid of me. Not at that point, but anyway, it turned out, a couple of years later, I just ended up shift rotation or whatever I was working with again. I didn't ask him anything, and he said, oh, Jim, you remember, when I said that I had dropped my gun or whatever? He says, no, I was showing it to a respiratory therapist in the stairwell or whatever. I accidentally, pulled the trigger. I said, well, I knew that. I'm trying to think. Okay, at that hospital, no more accidental firearms. Okay. Well, anyway, you get the, So I'm not saying, penalize them. But I do think when somebody does something really, really stupid, like you're supposed to, if you fire your firearm, if you're a police officer or a security officer, now a security officer, it might, and it's depending on what state, but that should be reported. And if somebody doesn't report it, if they report it, then you're going to know, okay, how did this happen? And then you can make rules and that type of stuff. And I'm not suggesting fines or whatever. But I do think, like the guy who, at Walmart, his gun went off, and there have been other cases similar to that. Probably the guy took off because, oh my God, I'm going to lose my permit. I won't be able to carry a gun. Oh my God, I won't be able to. Why was he carrying a gun in Walmart? Oh, to be a good guy. A good guy stops a bad guy. Bullshit. But we're not out of that fun. But I think that if somebody, if you're carrying a firearm, then you should be responsible. And so, anyway, I think I've covered. Okay, it's almost 4 a.m. I'm not sure if I'm going to stay up or go back to bed. Not sure. Anyway, what do you think? Thank you very much for watching.